Happy gray Canada Goose Day. The weather's reflecting what we all feel inside. So, I actually reignited my adventure today. I was 50-50 on what companies would do to encourage business, and they've responded with some of the best deals I've ever seen, along with the associated flexibility to cancel for a full refund. In the case of Aeroplan, they just ended their best redemption offer ever. I'm gonna keep the itinerary close to chest, or am I? Okay. If all goes well, I might actually travel domestically in Canada for the first time in a long time. My last cross-Canada trip was in 2016. So a couple years ago. And I use Canada as a placeholder destination when I'm trying to learn things or eliminate the risk of adventure traveling. Now, to be fair, even traveling in Canada can be adventurous if you're participating in extreme sports or those types of activities. I think, however, I'm gonna just chill and relax on this trip. The upcoming trip, if it goes, will be to catch the auroras up in Yellowknife. I think this is the perfect kind of trip to do now because it is relaxed. You're actually going up to a destination to wait for nature to happen. In some ways, you'd argue that even some other trips that I've done before, like adventure safaring in Africa, or even cruising in Antarctica, are trips where you're waiting and seeing a lot. So you travel far and wide to wait on nature and animals. Except this time, I'm waiting for a natural phenomenon, and if I'm lucky, the months of September and October will bear aurora fruit for me. I'm hoping to see them many times within the span of 2 weeks that I'll be there. Then, because Aeroplan still has the free stopover rule for round trips, I am routing for a week through Cape Breton Island. Cape Breton Island I've been before, but someone else on my itinerary is going there for their first time. I think it's well worth it. Surprisingly, Cape Breton Island has been sometimes ranked as the top island destination in the world, beating out such heavy hitters as Hawaii and Bali. I've been there and I have driven the entire length of the Cabo Trail, or rather, someone drove me. I enjoyed the panoramic scenery, and I think this time, if I can manage, I'll have more scenic stops along the way to see things. To be honest, the 8-hour drive, while breathtaking, and spectacularly scenic, that plane broke my train of thought. Okay. So the Aeroplan redemption came with the perfect flexibility clause, which is I can cancel for free until August 31st. So I have a good 2 months to assess what the fuck is going on with this pandemic and will I be able to travel into these provinces without a quarantine? If these provinces still have quarantine on them by the time the cancellation date comes, I will cancel, because quarantining when you're traveling to a destination is basically throwing 2 weeks worth of trip, and if both my destinations require it, that's 4 weeks worth, which is a whole month. So I'm just gonna have to wait and see whether these provinces are gonna open up their borders to each other. I think generally speaking they will, i.e. open without quarantine. So yes, I can obviously go to other provinces while observing a quarantine, but as a tourist, I would prefer to use my time actually touring around. So that's going to be my decision-making factor come the end of August. But again, these types of deals are a good way for you to capitalize on some of the best ever offers that have ever come to market, while still having peace of mind to be able to cancel if things really take a dire turn again, which they might. I'm gonna be honest with you though, I'm really at a loss on how to feel about this pandemic. In many ways, I've done remarkably well, but in many ways, I'm also struggling, maybe less than others outwardly, because I found an activity that I enjoy that does everything that I think one would need to stay happy and healthy during a pandemic. But I will say, eventually, the urge to adventure is going to start roaring again in me, and in some ways it has been. It's been dormant, I guess you could say, for about 3 months, but then I've also satiated that adventure with breakdancing and dancing overall, which I do see as an extreme sport. Trust me, it's one of the most extreme sports I've ever done. So, in many ways, I think that I've done remarkably well, but I'm also restless in other ways. Suffice to say that the offer did everything that it was supposed to, which is provide a first ever, never before seen value with the flexibility to cancel. As I've been debating what my travel strategy will be, I think this, my first foray into booking, has reflected what I think will need to be there in order for me to consider it. First of all, I think international travel for the time being is out for me. I had enough adventure coming back earlier during the pandemic. I know what it entails, and I think I'm here due to extreme luck, and I'd never bank on that happening again. In addition, I've yet to see the type of deals that would move me yet. So I mentioned that this Aeroplan redemption deal was the best ever offer they've had in their many decades of existence. That is what I'm talking about. Best ever. Some things I've seen are cheap, but I'm really holding out on something jaw-dropping. Because the way I've been observing, most prices to me are still high. They're still suffering from the fact that many companies have to half their capacity in order to properly distance. Where do you think that comes from? That comes out of a consumer's pocket every single time. You think the companies are cutting into theirs? They might for the little while or short term in order to build up customer goodwill, but to expect them to operate like that, unless they had other reasons for operating the vessels, I think is really a pipe dream. So I'm gonna have to assess. I have heard of some one-off crazy deals, but I think the terms and conditions were too early to know. The thing is that you can consider deals, but what might happen is they entice you with what looks like a very cheap price, but if you're ever truly stranded outside of Canada, it could turn expensive, especially if you're in the US. If you're in other countries that are developed, situation might be better. If you're in a developing country, your costs might be more affordable, but then you'll encounter mostly lower standards of healthcare. So there are many factors to consider, and I've yet to sit down and really strategize. All that really happened was the offer, more importantly, had the ability to fully cancel and obtain a full refund for no fees or change fees. That's exactly what encouraged me to book, and I think going forward, anything travel related will probably have to consider some sort of flexible cancel and full refund clause, so that even if, technically speaking, travel bans are lifted, maybe people, for their own reasons, just assess differently than what a country assesses. That can also happen. As much as I've always urged Canadians to follow the government's advice when it comes to travel, travel.gc.ca, I also recognize that as fully functioning adults, we're also going to have to make our own decisions and assessments, and that's the phase that I'm in now. I'm in the collecting data phase, and I really need someone to dangle a lot of treats at me in order for me to consider booking, and my first one happened today, which is fully refundable. I still have 2 months to assess the situation, and if it looks dire, then I'll just outright cancel for my money back, and that's how it's going to be. Today, I think I'm going to just practice dance without any music. To be honest, I usually practice without music. I know today's Canada Day, but it falls on a practice day as opposed to a choreography day. Maybe I'll take the inspiration and do something next week. But to be honest with you, I think that me creating choreography every 2 weeks is about right. And I've been alternating with a breaking piece and a modern dance piece. Although the last couple of weeks I've been rather obsessed with a modern dance technique called tutting, which is Egypt inspired and named after King Tut, I assume. I might practice that more because that's what I've been focusing on. Well, we'll see. As anything, creativity comes as it comes, and that'll be that. Fresh greenery. I'll assume that was a Canadian goose. The grey Canada goose flying. Ooh. Okay. Because I was busy booking, I never noticed that today we had an actual substantial rain, or at least rain enough to make the floor slippery. So I might have to be careful about how I practice today. Trying to decide if it's too slippery. Real with you, tuts look much better without the bulky jacket covering my ankles. Or I might want the jacket to cover my shitty fucked up ankles. make a note to myself, which is to try to add hits. That's going to come slowly but surely because it makes dancing look much more dynamic. It's more of a style element. Okay, that was a shorter dance session than usual. It was a little bit of practice. Filming days are actually my rest days, so I generally like to tone it down, take it easy, except for some weeks where the choreography comes together very late. Last week was an example where I actually choreographed for about 2 hours. I choreographed / practiced for about 2 hours before I actually filmed, and that might have happened one more time. But normally speaking, rest is just as important as practice and performance. I mentioned George St. Pierre's trainer Faraz Zahabi before, and hey, who better to take advice from than the trainer of the best mixed martial artists in history, the greatest of all time, in my subjective opinion. Okay, so I guess moving forward, I'll be assessing all of my travel options. I hope to successfully hunt down the aurora, otherwise known in lay terms as the Northern Lights. I usually prefer to travel internationally because I have that goal to explore all 193 UN countries, but in years like this where force majeure has changed my plan, I'll just have to substitute with the next best thing.